A few weeks ago on this channel, I asked whether or not Donald Trump could cancel the midterm elections. You can watch the entire video if you'd like. The short answer that I came to in the video is that no, he can't, and that there are shenanigans that the administration can do. There are ways to interfere with the elections, but outright canceling them or finding some way to totally make them basically non-viable is not really in the cards. The American election system is too decentralized, too diffuse, involves too many people for that to be feasible. And I think President Trump realizes this because as of late, he's been talking about wanting to nationalize the nation's elections.
The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting.
He has been insisting that the states are only agents of the federal government, and thus that they really should be working to make sure that they conduct elections in accordance with what the president wants. Now, of course, that is not what the Constitution says at all. We can check out what the Constitution says real quick. The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as to the places of choosing senators. The states control elections, and the only entity in the national government that can directly change that is the Congress. And nowhere does the Constitution say that the states are somehow mere agents of the federal government. In fact, the kind of innovation of American government is this notion of dual sovereignty, or really, if I'm going to be precise, of locating sovereignty in the people, and then sovereignty is distributed across multiple institutions. And so it's better to describe the states as co-sovereigns with the national government. Now, this gets tricky given the supremacy clause in the Constitution and the settlement of the Civil War, in which it was more or less decided that the national government was truly supreme over the states in kind of a fundamental sense. And so this notion of co-sovereignty has been complicated. But even still, even with those developments, it is not the case that the states are simply departments of the national government, that they are their own things, and they have their own responsibilities and obligations and prerogatives when it comes to the conduct of elections, no matter how much Donald Trump may not like that. So Donald Trump says he wants to nationalize elections. One of his allies, Steve Bannon, says that they intend to send ICE agents to swarm polling places, to intimidate people out of voting, to make sure that the elections are not stolen again.
We're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. We're not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again.
And of course, we also had the scene out of Fulton County in Georgia, the Atlanta area, where the FBI and Tulsi Gabbard, for some reason, was there taking election materials related to 2020.
Today, ballots reflecting how thousands of people voted in the 2020 election have left the Fulton County, Georgia election office, where they were stored and are now in the hands of the federal government.
And I'll note that on the day I record this, and it's, I believe, Thursday, February 5th. I don't believe it is Thursday, February 5th. I know that. On the day I record this, the president spoke at the National Prayer Breakfast, where he insisted, as he has for many years, that he actually won in 2020, and he even insisted that he won the popular vote in 2016.
You know, they rigged the second election. I had to win it. Had to win it. I needed it for my own ego. I would have had a bad ego for the rest of my life. Now I really have a big ego, though. Beating these lunatics was incredible, right? What a great feeling. Winning every swing state, winning the popular vote. The first time, you know, they said I didn't win the popular vote. I did.
So what to make of all of this? What to make of all of this? I have three main thoughts. The first is to reiterate what I said earlier, what I said in the previous video, that there's no doubt that the president wants to subvert the midterm elections. That is clear, but that you have to remember, you have to think, you have to ask yourself whether or not he has the operational capacity to do that. Intentions are not the same as capabilities. Remember that. Intentions are not the same as capabilities. And so his intention, obviously, is to try to subvert the election. But does he have the capability to do so? That is a separate question. Think in terms of things that can be done to act directly on the election capacity. I would say that no, the capability isn't there. Which brings me to my next point, which is that I'm actually not all that sure that Trump cares that much about the midterms. He cares about them in as much that he doesn't want Democrats to have power because he's afraid that it's going to put him into political and legal jeopardy. But the Fulton County raid and his obsession with 2020 and 2016 makes me think that a good deal of this is just ego satisfaction. He wants to be able to prove that, in fact, he won the 2020 election. The idea of losing to Joe Biden is intolerable to him. He wants to prove that it didn't happen. He wants to manufacture some evidence that this did not happen. And so he is going after that evidence in an attempt to make this case. I think he also clearly wants to delegitimize elections as much as he can, spread the idea that they are not trustworthy. This is part of the motivation behind this effort to get voter rolls from states and build some national voter database. Now, let's be clear, states have been refusing this because the federal government has no right to this information. They've successfully refused it. Courts have said you have no right to this information. But what the administration, I think, wants to do is build a big national voter database from which they can make false claims of fraud and false accusations of fraud. The Steve Bannon stuff. Now, I gotta say, I think you should remember that Steve Bannon is a bullshit artist. That's like his literal job. He's bragged about flooding the zone with bullshit. It's his whole thing. And I think you should give real consideration to the possibility that Bannon says these things knowing that some of you will see them and panic and get afraid and maybe choose not to participate in the political process. I think this is something of an attempt to play mind games. But I don't want to dismiss the concern people have over ICE. I have argued before, both in that previous video and in other places, that you have to think about this operationally and logistically. There aren't that many guys. I've argued before that you have to think about this in terms of what the actual electoral picture is going to look like when you're thinking about the House of Representatives, for example. That's 435 elections. When you're thinking about the number of likely competitive seats, that's anywhere from 25 seats to 75 seats if there's a straight up kind of blue wave. So 75 seats, the margin, I believe, in the House between the majority is like 1 or 2 seats. And so even if you had somehow the operational capacity to deploy ICE agents, and you only have about 15,000 of them, to literally tens of thousands of precincts, it would still be the case that you wouldn't do much because there are just too many elections and the wave is too big and you're not really going to suppress enough vote. Remember, legislative elections don't operate like presidential elections. There aren't swing states that determine the whole thing. Even when it comes to Senate races, if there's a sufficient enough wave, it's actually not going to be all that obvious which Senate seats are going to be the most vulnerable, and that's covering even more ground. So I think operationally, this is not likely to happen. Will the administration maybe send in a few targeted places, a handful of districts, places that Trump is obsessed with, like Atlanta and Philadelphia and Detroit? What's common about those places? Think about it. Will he try to send ICE goons there to do some intimidation? I think that might happen. But the effect, I don't think is going to amount to much because these are heavily Democratic places. And the other thing, and what we've seen from events on the ground in Minneapolis, from events ongoing in Springfield, Ohio, where they're preparing for an ICE surge there, what we've seen from Chicago is that when confronted with these people, Americans don't shrink away in fear. They get even more defiant. They get even more defiant. And so my view is that if you were to attempt this, it would backfire horrendously. It would encourage people to go vote. And this is the last thing I want to say. So much political commentary, and I think this is to its detriment, tries to frighten you, tries to scare you, tries to make you think that you are in some way, shape, or form powerless, that events are happening around you and there's not much you can do to stop them. But this is a place, whether or not your elections are secure, whether or not your elections are protected, this is a place where you can have as direct an effect as is possible in politics. You can volunteer to work polls. You can volunteer to be a poll observer. You can learn about election administration. You can volunteer to count ballots. You can volunteer to participate in this process. In some places, they even pay the volunteers. So you're a paid employee doing this. You can participate and you can volunteer and you can be a part of this. And you can take steps. You can take individual steps to make sure that where you live, elections are as secure as they possibly can be. You can make plans with your friends and your family to go vote. You can make plans for what you'll do if there is an ICE agent at your polling place. You can go as a group. You can show solidarity. In the last year or so, there's been a lot of talk about solidarity among people, about mutual aid, about helping each other out, about assisting each other in the midst of all these horrors. And we don't often think about election administration as part of that, but you should think of it as part of that. Think of it as one way, one important way that you can act to help your neighbors, to help defend your democracy from the people who want to undermine it. Ultimately, the only people who can save a democracy are those who live under it. The only people who are going to save us is us. And so if you're really worried about what might happen in November, if you're really worried about the safety and integrity of elections, I'm going to strongly encourage you to get involved. Because you, yes, you, watching this, at least if you're an American, you have the ability to make a difference here. It's worth giving it a shot. Thank you, as always, for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please check out this one and consider giving the page a subscribe, and I'll see you next time.